Morning. Today I'm going to talk about having a humble heart. God put it on my mind. Now, I don't get into making rules about how you come to God, but I thought I'd just describe what I understand. A heart that's ready to hear God is one coming simply to Him, like that little child He called to Him. Humble yourself like this little child and you'll be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, He said. It's good to keep in mind the question the apostles were asking Him at the time, which brought that up. Who of us is the greatest, Lord? Who's the leader in this bunch? It says that Jesus called a little child to Him and said, he who humbles himself like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So it was a response. Don't be like that. Be like this. What kind of heart do you come to God with when you're coming like that little child? I'm sure a lot of you can picture it. You know, the way a little child is just open and full of wonder. Every little thing is exciting to them. Even a little ant on the ground. I think it's about just coming to Him and being willing to stand there and just wait. But it's not waiting with nothing on your mind. It's waiting with an expectation. You know, He called me over here for a reason. He has something in mind. But I'm not impatient. I'm just curious. And I'm willing to go wherever He leads. That's having a humble heart. Now, one thing we don't want is to have a false humility. And you'll see right away when you think about it, that little child wouldn't have had a false humility. And that false humility is thinking, oh, I'm not worthy. I can't believe He called me over. Oh, geez, you know, here I come. Oh, Lord, please don't strike me dead because I dare to look at you. I'm sure you can imagine that that was not on that child's mind when he came over to Jesus. Else he wouldn't have come over. If he was afraid of Jesus, he would have never come to Him. But can you imagine a little child who would be afraid of Jesus? Or if you do imagine that, I want you to imagine a different kind of child. One who's hopeful, one who's open, one who's interested and willing to learn, but one who can see that gentleness in Jesus and is drawn to it. Because to Jesus, all of us are like those little children. The thing that He doesn't like as much as when you grow up and you put on all kinds of airs or pretense. What He likes is someone who's open to Him like that little child. That little child listens to Jesus. It's just waiting. And you know that little child wouldn't second guess what Jesus tells him to do. That doesn't mean it's because He's simple. Because He's open. Because He trusts Jesus. He rests in Jesus. Well, it's an easy thing when you trust Jesus. I remember when I began this journey, I looked into God with true wonder. I knew that I didn't have the answers, and I needed the answers. You know, the ones that came from Him. I knew that whatever I had pursued in life up to that point, even if I was looking for answers, they weren't the right ones, and that the world and even the church wasn't telling me what I needed. Because nothing I knew that far had helped me. Well, you know, you could say a little bit here and there it may have helped me. I had clues. But it was when I was ready to come to Jesus, like the foolish man who needs wisdom. Once I didn't think of my own wisdom and understanding as being great, then I was ready to receive the kind of wisdom that only God can give. I did have to be willing to put down my own wisdom to realize that my wisdom was foolish in the eyes of God. And I was really at a loss at the time because I really felt down deep in my heart that what I believed and what I knew was just not true. It couldn't be true because how would I end up where I was? I wasn't mad about it at all. I realized, you know, what I believed what was my own doing. I had accepted beliefs that weren't true. I could say, well, I was mad because I've been lied to. But that wasn't my attitude, let me put it that way. I realized that I hadn't been going to God for my answers. So then when I came to God, God is my help. God has the answers. But I don't know the first thing about how I go about getting those answers from Him. But I know He has the answers. I know He is the answer. I know it's in Him. But I don't even know the first thing about what that means. I was a blank slate. And you could say I made myself a blank slate by having that attitude. But on the other hand, it wasn't all me because I really was a blank slate. I mean, I really just had lost all faith in what I knew up to that point. Because it didn't give me any direction in life. I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I would do. But let's go back to that little child for a moment. Because that little child didn't have all that complicated stuff going on in the back of his mind when he came to Jesus that way. It was just a simple attitude. We could make a parallel. That little child didn't think that he knew anything, except for what he did know. The ground under his feet, the air that he breathed, the kids that he loved to play with, the joy of life, of just being alive. He wasn't worried about anything. I was worried about things at the time that I'm talking about. But he wasn't worried. He was just ready. He didn't need anybody to tell him to trust Jesus. He just trusted Him. That's why I think God gave me that word when I was in that place. Wanted to know what to do with my life and what I should live for. What could I commit myself to? I didn't know. I was suddenly ready to commit myself to something of value as that blank slate. And He led me supernaturally to that Bible verse. Interesting, because at the time, I didn't know how the Bible could be as helpful to me as it really could be. I'd heard about it. I'd heard that I wouldn't really get the answers until I got in there in the Bible and got the answers for myself. I read it for myself. But even that, you see, was sort of like a self-help way of looking at things. Like, oh, you got to get in there and you got to dig for it. Let me say a better way to look at it is that it's a living word. God's Bible is the word of life. And it's living because it lives today and speaks to you now. Even though it was written 2,000 years or more ago. But because it's God's word, it still speaks. And you don't have to necessarily dig very far to find what you need. It's not hard work. It's trusting work. It's work that's best done when you come with that heart that's open to hear God's leading. I supernaturally received my start in the Bible. There I was, walking around office buildings by myself. I was a security guard at the time. Having a pretty open relationship with God in my heart. But it wasn't at all developed at this point. It was just like I was explaining. I was just that blank slate. Didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to get started. But I knew God was the answer. That much I knew. I knew God was the way. A minister's office. It was like his headquarters, whatever, office. And there was a book, a coffee book, sitting on a table. And the coffee book was a book of Bible verses that were done up in calligraphy. They were all pretty. I mean, there was like 1 or 2 verses on each page, just illustrated and made beautiful. I didn't know the power of the word at this time. But I walked up, saw the coffee book on the table. The first thing I saw, it like was illuminated to me in a way. Walked up to it, reached down, opened it to the middle. Seemingly randomly, not at all random. Opened it to the middle, it fell open. To he that humbles himself like this little child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. I was pretty amazed. I was stunned just at the relevance of that word to me at that moment. I've been looking for an answer. What do I do? How do I do it? If you humble yourself like this little child, you'll be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And then I realized it didn't just say that would be a good thing to do. It said that that would make me the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It's a little bit ironic because when I think back about the question that the apostles posed to him, which prompted this response, that wasn't really what I was wanting. I wasn't wanting to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. I was just wanting to know what to do with my life. And it turns out that that word, even though it might have been a response to those apostles' question at the time about being who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, it turns out that that word worked for just life. Worked for my whole life. Humble yourself like that little child, and you'll be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. You don't even have to look for more than that, because that right there on its own will make you the greatest. Not just great, but the greatest. That's the best you could do. Come when you're called. Stand there and be ready. Whatever that Jesus would have asked that little child to do, he would have done. But think about it. I believe the Lord is prompting me with this right now. Think about it. That little kid's not going to go jump off a bridge if Jesus tells him to do it. But you and I both know that Jesus would never tell the little child to go jump off a bridge. But you know, Jesus probably isn't telling you to go jump off a bridge or jump off a mountain somewhere. Well, it's not the true image. What's the true image? The true image is the little child walking up to Jesus with no preconceived idea about what was going to happen. Just walking up simply with a heart that was open to be led. I think that's what it comes down to. Having a humble heart before God. When you come to God, being open to be led. And not thinking that you have the answer, but really truly to be led. Which means, I don't know how to do things, but Lord, you do. Lord, if you told me to do something hard, you would also give me the inspiration I needed to do it. You would also make it easy for me. So I can come trusting, just trusting, and just expecting the right result. So there I was, looking at that verse for the first time and receiving it and believing it. What was my instruction from that point forward? Let's keep it right here, son. Let's keep it real simple. Just stay before me with the heart open like that. And let's just continue talking. Now, I didn't have some great audible voice of the Lord from that point on talking to me. It was simply that my heart was open. I could say I was ready to hear, but I wasn't expecting that kind of a voice anyway. What did I expect? I expected nothing. I expected that I didn't know how the answer was gonna come. But I had a whole lot of joy and hope at that moment that the Word just spoke to me as if it was alive to me today. And so my next step was going to the Word and getting more, because I believed it would speak to me the same way. And that was kind of the key there. I wasn't just going to the Word and just dryly studying it. Every time I would go to the Word, I would go with the expectation that it's just as alive to me as that first word I read. I mean, of course, you know pretty quickly, you open the Bible to just any place and start reading. It's not like the first word you see is going to necessarily come alive to you like that. Even that day after I read that Bible verse in that book on the coffee table, I flipped through the rest of the book. I read the rest of the verses in that book. And some were good, but none of them spoke to me the way that one did. Not that day. But there would be other days when different words would mean more to me. And they would come alive to me at the right moment to teach me truth. So my journey through the Word of God began, but never out of touch with Him. Matter of fact, I remember a time when I was feeling out of touch with Him as I was studying His Word. And I asked God about it. And this is important. This is where it comes in, not having that false humility. As I asked Him about it, I believe there'd be an answer. I wasn't asking Him if I didn't think there would be an answer. I didn't feel myself some maggot or worm that didn't dare ask God questions. And He spoke a word to me at that moment. And then He confirmed it in the Bible as I was reading. And suddenly, the connection was real again. Is I could be in there, and I could be feeling like I didn't have that connection at that moment. But God could make it right. If I would just open up and just be real with Him. And that's what it means not to be falsely humble. Because sometimes you don't get it. Sometimes you get frustrated. No use trying to hide it from God. No use trying to manipulate your attitude into the right shape to fit great revelation. Because that's not the way it comes. That's what I mean when I say I don't like to make rules up about how you approach God or any of that. When I talk about having a humble heart before God, let's just say it's not always the same thing. But I think you're starting to get a picture of it just from what I'm talking about. Because that's basically what it is just having a picture of how you're approaching God. You're not approaching God with the false humility where you're groveling for help. Because He doesn't look at you that way. He said He didn't make you a servant, but a son. So when you come into God's presence, you don't come in groveling on your knees. You come in with confidence, but not arrogance, like a spoiled son, but just knowing. When I say confidence, I mean trusting. Just trusting Him. Trusting that whatever He says to you is going to be for your good. And that's the difference between God and man. Because man might say things to you that sound really good, but they won't necessarily be for your good. They might be for their good. God, on the other hand, every single word out of His mouth is like bread. It'll feed you and sustain you. And it'll give you what you need. So yeah, that's a big part of having a humble heart before God, is not being falsely humble. Is being confident, but not arrogant. Look, it's just being who you are without putting on any airs or any pretense about like trying to be, humble and meek and mild. Because I know I've got into those places where it's like, oh, I just want to be really aware of you. I just want to really be open to you, God. And I want to know you with all my heart. And you get that attitude. Yeah, you're doing all that talking and none of the listening. It sounds good. But what is good is when you're just like, thank you, Jesus. I don't expect anything in particular except to know that you're there. You're the best. I'm not going to pretend anything. I'm just going to receive what you have for me. Now you see, I've said all that, but I don't have to say all that. I just have to have a heart like that. Yes, God. And you don't even have to make a big display out of yes, God. You don't have to stand there, oh, God, fill me. I've seen some preachers ask people to do that. Just open yourself, blah, 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 blah. And it's like they're trying to, force you into being open to God. God. Because this is a God who meets you in the secret place of your heart. This is a God who meets you where no one else can go. It's between you and Him. That's real relationship with God. I appreciate a preacher who tries to get you to open up. I appreciate the effort. And I understand where he's coming from. Look, because if you could just lay all yourself down, lay all the ideas down that you have, lay your expectations at the feet of Jesus and just receive new revelation. Yes, it's great. And you should. And it does work. But good. So sometimes you should do that maybe. Try to force yourself to open up a little bit. It's not a bad idea. But after you do that, just calm down. And just listen quietly. Because God speaks to you in the secret place of your heart. And then He'll talk about things that matter the most. Show you things that will be dear to you for your whole life. That'll feed you as you keep going. You'll think back about those words He's spoken to you. Or that thought that He gave you. Or that bit of understanding that just suddenly was there. You'll think back about it. And like Kim Clement said when God shines his light in that dark place. We'll call it your heart, right? In the holy place where he lives. That gives you a snapshot of what's in there that'll lead you for the rest of your life. And I'm glad to say that's true. But I'm also glad to say that Jesus will also teach you to turn the light on in that dark place by looking to him, where you don't need just a snapshot, where you have a walking, open revelation of God at all times, because he's there with you and in you, and you can see him and he can see you, and he lives inside of you and looks out through you, and you look out through him. And it's continuous, and it should be continuous, because God is not keeping himself hidden from you. The only thing that hides your eyes from God is the false picture that the world has put in your mind. Because you believe what you see around you more than you do God. You put your faith on what you see and not on God himself. Let's not go there, because there's no need to get down on yourself about this at all. Because knowing that, look, that's just the symptom, okay? It's easy to fix. All you have to do is have that heart like that little child, humble, and just receive from God. Just be open to him and let him teach you, because he said he would, and he will, and he's doing it already. I'm sure you already know that. And don't think about that false image. Don't think about how the world is dragging you down, because Jesus overcame the world. The world, it sees things in a very negative light. But you're no longer of the world. Not when you have Jesus. You're now part of his world. And what does it mean to be a part of Jesus' world? It means openness. It means trust. It means kindness and love is flowing to you at every moment from Jesus himself. Even if you don't know that he's living in your heart, even if that's not fully understood by you, it's still flowing to you, that love. Trust it. Trust the love that's flowing to you, because it'll show you. It'll show you. You don't need to fear the false image anymore. You don't need to fear the separation from God anymore. You just need to stay in him. And the good part, the good news of that, is that you are in him. So you don't need to get into him to stay in him. You're already there. So stay in him. And the way you stay in him, the way that you already are in him, is you look to him with faith and you trust him. You trust that what he said was true. That you're in him, not separated from him, and you stay. And he will flow. He will teach. He will build you up. He'll encourage you. He's made an everlasting covenant with you by coming to live inside you. He has guaranteed you for all eternity by taking up residence in your heart. Now look to him in your heart. Trust him in your heart. Be open to him and expect to receive everything you need from him in your heart. Like God told Paul that one time, my grace is sufficient for you. God's influence in your heart is sufficient for you in all things. And you say, well, I want God to magically transport me from here to there. And he could do it, I'm sure. But the way it usually happens is that grace will be sufficient for you in your heart. That influence will be sufficient to lead you there. And you might have to walk there on your own. No, that's wrong. Because you're not on your own. With every step you take, he's strengthening. He's giving you the strength to make the journey. But more than that, it's a pleasure to walk that journey with God. And at the end of that journey, when you're there where you wanted to be, you can actually take some pride in the fact that you walked there. Then you see, that's when you've become a grown-up son a grown-up daughter of God. Because you did it. With his help, with his influence in your heart. It was sufficient to get you there. And you see, now that you've done that, you are now this grown-up child of God. This son or daughter of God. This father in God. This mother in God. This big brother in God. Because now you've learned to follow God, and now you are doing the will of God. See? If you've enjoyed this message today, if this is a message for you, you want to help me get this message out, subscribe to my channel, and like the video, and go and watch a few more videos. Like them too, because doing that will strengthen the message on YouTube. Message of how easy it is to rely on God and how great God makes your life. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time. I had a good time. Hope you did too.